Welcome to the Maker Lab at Home from the Hillsborough Public Library. Today I've got an experiment that you can do with just a few ingredients you can probably find in your kitchen. You may be familiar with kinetic sand. That's sand that when you push together forms a shape but crumbles back into itself without drying out. Well, I've got a similar creation that you can make in your kitchen. This is kinetic dough. We're going to make this out of flour and oil. Sounds pretty simple, right? Let me explain it. So we're going to start with some regular, from your kitchen, all-purpose flour. Let's go ahead and grab 1 cup of that. And add that to our bowl. 1 cup of flour. And we can start with just 1 tablespoon of oil. We'll add that in, and to incorporate it, we're going to use a fork. So, use the fork to blend the oil into the flour. And what's going on there is that oil is silicone-based and it's a polymer. The thing about polymers is they like to stick to each other. They're long chains of molecules that sort of hook at the end to bind together. So when we mix that with the flour, what we're creating is a polymer-coated flour that will stick to itself and ideally not to you. So you mix that up. You might need to do it for a few minutes. What you're looking for is a texture that's a little bit grainy, but not as smooth as regular flour. By the end, we're probably going to add 2 tablespoons of oil total. So let's go ahead and do that now. It's our 2nd tablespoon. And we'll mix that up into the flour. There. Can you see that popped up, almost puffy texture? That's kind of what we're looking for. And so once we have that, you can see if it's the right consistency by smushing it together and seeing if it holds its shape. Again, we're not making a pie dough, but just a sort of sand, fluffy sand, that'll stick to itself. So, if we go ahead and put that on our play area, when you push it together, you can use it to form shapes, but then when you smush it back, you can crumble it back into a powder again. This is similar to the kinetic sand that you would buy at the store, which is just sand coated with a similar polymer, usually vegetable oil or another kind of oil. So it has those characteristics. It won't dry out, it'll remain like that. If you want to keep it fresh, you can add just a little bit of baking soda so it won't go bad. Mix it all together. Now if you want to color it, you're going to need an oil-based food coloring. The regular water-based food coloring won't work because oil doesn't mix with water. We did that in one of our earlier experiments, and they're still there, not mixed. One fun thing to do is to compare this flour to the plain regular flour as it comes out. See the difference in texture. So we have our uncoated flour that when we play with, it's just a powder. It gets all over our fingers and doesn't stick to itself. Whereas the polymer-coated flour has internal friction, meaning it's sticking to itself and is less likely to stick to us. You can take this even further if you do want to make it into a complete dough by adding more oil until you get a malleable ball. It's not quite the texture of Play-Doh, but this is the beginnings of something like a pie crust or something that you would roll out as a cooking dough. Interesting to see that those polymers are what allow it to stretch and form into the shapes that we want. Some ways you can mix up this experiment include trying it with water to see how water differs from oil when you combine that with the flour, or making a dough out of water, flour, and salt. If you do that, you can make a dough that if you dry it out, will eventually harden almost like a cement into whatever you do. So you could mold a shape out of that salt dough, maybe a star or something. Then either bake it at the lowest setting your oven has or let it sit for 24 hours and it'll become a hardened dough. Why do you think that happens? Thank you for joining us from the Hillsborough Public Library. I hope you enjoyed this simple experiment and craft that you can do at home. And I'm going to do what any good scientist would do now and clean up my mess. See you next time.